There's something your grandparents knew about money that you've probably already forgotten. Picture this. You earn next to nothing. No one will give you a loan even if you beg on your knees. And yet, you don't owe a single dollar. Sounds impossible, right? Well, that was everyday life for thousands of African American families in the 1950s. While today people are drowning in payments, subscriptions, and installment plans, they lived through one of the hardest eras in history. With the system against them, with minimum wages, with the door closed on opportunity, and they still managed to do something that today feels almost otherworldly. Sleep soundly without owing anyone anything. And no, they didn't have any magic secret or a hidden fortune. What they had were habits. Simple ones, repeated ones, passed down from generation to generation, like a silent inheritance. Before we go on, a part of you knows you need to hear this. So hit subscribe right now and turn on the bell, because I promise you, secret number 25 is going to leave you thinking. Now, tell me something. We have more technology than ever. More banks, more apps, more financial education online than in the entire history of humanity combined. And yet, household debt keeps growing. What did they know that we've forgotten? Let's find out. Grab a pen and paper if you want, because I promise you, out of the 25 coming up, you'll be able to apply more than one this very week. Secret #1, the envelope system. Before online banking existed, something much more effective existed: paper envelopes. Picture the scene. It's Friday, payday. The kitchen table, several craft paper envelopes lined up, each one with a name written by hand. Food, rent, electricity, emergencies. The cash was counted out and divided among them, one by one. Each envelope was a real, physical boundary you could touch with your hands. When an envelope ran out, spending in that category stopped. Period. There was no, "I'll just put it on the card and figure it out next month." This method forced them to know something we've almost completely lost today. Exactly how much money they truly had left, at any given moment, without looking at a single screen. Interestingly, decades later, personal finance experts still recommend modern versions of this very system. Now they call it zero-based budgeting, or cash stuffing, because, surprisingly, it still works better than most banking apps out there today. Why do you think something so simple is still so effective almost 80 years later? Because physical cash hurts to spend in a way a card never will make you feel. When you pay with plastic, your brain doesn't process the loss the same way it does when you watch a bill leave your hand. That's why it's so easy today to overspend without even noticing. The lesson is brutally simple. You don't need technology to control your money. You need limits, and you need to respect them. Secret #2. They fixed everything that could be fixed. In the 1950s, the first instinct wasn't to throw away and buy new. It was to repair. An iron that stopped heating up didn't end up in the trash. It ended up on the kitchen table with someone trying to find the loose wire. Worn-out shoes went to the neighborhood shoemaker for a new sole, not into the garbage can. And this wasn't born only out of economic necessity. It came from a deep respect for the effort it had taken to earn that money. Every object was an investment, and investments don't get thrown away at the first problem. They get cared for, maintained, given a second life. That habit, repeated year after year, created a quiet form of savings that made an enormous economic difference over the course of a decade. Today we live surrounded by a use-it-and-toss-it culture, literally designed to make things last less. It's called planned obsolescence, and your current phone is probably a perfect example of it. But they understood something we've completely forgotten. Money you don't spend unnecessarily keeps working for you. Secret #3. They saved even when they barely earned anything. Here comes one of those beliefs that needs to be broken once and for all, thinking that saving is only possible if you earn a lot. False. Completely false. These families, often with incomes that barely covered the basics, still found a way to set something aside. 5 cents in a glass jar hidden in the cupboard. A coin that didn't get spent just in case. It wasn't about spectacular amounts or complicated savings formulas. It was, simply, about building the habit and sustaining it over time, month after month, year after year. They knew something most people ignore today, that savings, however small it seemed at the time, could become the exact lifeline that pulled a family out of a real crisis. An illness, a lost job, A roof that broke down right when they least expected it. And this might be one of the most important lessons in this entire video. So write this down. Discipline outweighs amount. It's not the same to earn a lot and save nothing, as it is to earn little and save something consistently. In the long run, the second person wins. Always. If you're enjoying what you've heard so far, hit like on this video right now. Seriously, it helps far more than you think in getting this content to reach more people. And there are still secrets ahead that are going to surprise you quite a bit. Secret #4. Family was their financial insurance. When problems hit, they didn't call a bank. They called their family. There was a real support network, woven together with patience over the years. Neighbors, aunts and uncles, cousins, close family friends, all willing to help when someone needed it. If someone lost their job, food would show up at their door without anyone even having to ask. That allowed them to get through rough patches without falling into interest-bearing debt, and it also strengthened something that's very scarce today: real trust between the people who live around you. In an era without easy personal loans, without lines of credit or credit cards, solidarity was literally the bank. It ran on a different currency: trust, built over years of helping one another. It's a powerful reminder that your financial stability doesn't depend only on how much money you have saved, but also on who's around you the day everything falls apart. Secret #5. Kids learned by watching, not by listening. No one taught them economics in school. They learned by watching. An 8-year-old would go with his mother to the market and see, without anyone explaining it in words, how she compared prices between two stalls before buying. He'd see how his father decided to wait one more month before buying new boots for the winter. He'd see the conversations at the dinner table about which expense the family could afford that month and which one had to wait. And those images, repeated week after week throughout an entire childhood, stayed etched in memory for life, far more deeply than any theoretical finance class you might take as an adult. Secret #6. Having debt wasn't normal. Today it seems like owing money is simply part of being an adult. Back then it was the exact opposite, something to be avoided at all costs, almost like a family embarrassment. Not because they were perfect, or because they never had money problems, but because they knew exactly what it feels like when your personal freedom depends on a payment you haven't made yet. They preferred to wait, to save, to endure a little discomfort in the waiting, and buy later, rather than compromise their future peace of mind for instant gratification. That patience protected them from impulsive decisions and completely unnecessary financial risks. The world has changed enormously since then. Now debt is just a click away, literally in your pocket. But this idea is just as powerful today as it was 70 years ago. Don't mortgage your future money to satisfy today's whim. Secret #7. Hand-me-down clothes embarrassed no one. A piece of clothing passed from one sibling to another, and nobody felt bad about it. On the contrary, there was almost a sense of pride in inheriting your older brother's jacket. A shirt might start its life with the oldest child in the family, move on to the second, and end up as a kitchen rag once it was no longer fit to wear. What mattered was never constantly having something brand new. It was making the most of everything that was still usable. That cut expenses considerably, without really affecting the household's quality of life. And along the way, it taught, without a single word, a lesson many adults today still haven't fully learned. Your worth as a person isn't measured by how new your clothes are, or by the brand on the label. Secret #8. They never spent to impress anyone. This is one of the most important ones in the whole video, so pay close attention to what's coming. They knew something that today, with social media, has become even more dangerous. A huge number of people spend money they don't have, to show off a life they also don't have. A neighbor might have the oldest car on the street and, at the same time, be the only one without a single outstanding debt. Meanwhile, another might have the newest car, financed over 3 years, and be drowning by the end of every month. They did exactly the opposite of what today's culture dictates. Before buying something, they honestly asked themselves whether they truly needed it, or whether they were just trying to look good to a neighbor, a brother-in-law, or anyone whose opinion, at the end of the day, wasn't going to pay a single one of their bills. Their priority wasn't to appear successful to others. It was to actually be secure, even if no one else ever saw it. And that difference, small as it may seem on paper, completely changes the direction of your finances over the years. Because appearances last barely 5 minutes on social media, the consequences of a bad financial decision can follow you for years. If anything you've heard so far reminds you of your parents or grandparents, write it in the comments right now. I genuinely want to read it. Sometimes the best financial lesson doesn't come from a book or a YouTube channel like this one. It comes from whoever raised us. Secret #9. They lived below their means. When income went up, they didn't immediately rush to raise their spending level. If someone got a promotion or a better paying job, the house stayed the same, the clothes stayed the same, the car, if they had one, stayed the same. Instead of spending every extra dollar on visibly improving their standard of living, they kept most of their usual habits and put that difference toward savings or toward preparing for whatever came next. They knew, from their own experience and from their parents' experience, that good times don't last forever, so they used favorable periods to strengthen their situation, instead of locking themselves into new, permanent fixed expenses that would be very hard to sustain if their luck changed. Secret #10. Big purchases required patience. Buying a car, a refrigerator, or any major appliance was never a decision made overnight. It usually involved months, sometimes even a full year, of planning and deliberate saving. The family would talk about it at the table, compare options, wait for the right moment, and only then, with the money already in hand, make the purchase. That waiting period had an advantage that a lot of people today completely overlook. It allowed them to clearly separate momentary wants from real needs. When someone spends months saving for something, they end up thinking much more carefully about whether that purchase is really worth it, or whether it was just a passing impulse that would have been forgotten within a week. Today we live in a world where practically everything can be obtained instantly, with a single click, even without having the money available at that moment. However, that ease of buying has just as easily fueled the massive debt we see today. They understood something a lot of us have forgotten. Delaying gratification wasn't a painful sacrifice. It was, in fact, a way of protecting their future financial freedom. Secret #11. Home-cooked food was their secret weapon. Few decisions had as constant an impact on the family budget as daily food. That's why almost every meal was made at home, without exception. This wasn't just a matter of culture or family tradition. It was, above all, an extremely effective economic strategy, even if no one called it that at the time. Cooking at home let them feed the whole family for a fraction of what eating out would have cost, and it also gave them full control over the ingredients. What's interesting, and this applies to you today too, is that the savings created by this habit were rarely noticeable overnight. It's not that you'd save a fortune the first week, but after months, and especially after years, the accumulated difference could be absolutely enormous. It's one of those perfect examples where small decisions, repeated thousands of times without much thought, end up producing extraordinary results over time. Secret #12. They grew part of their own food. Even those living with very limited resources tried to make use of whatever space they had to grow some of their own food. There was no need for large plots of land or advanced farming knowledge. A small backyard or even a few pots on a balcony was enough to have tomatoes, lettuce, or fresh herbs for much of the year, without depending entirely on the market. Beyond the direct financial savings, this practice brought something even more valuable in the long run: real independence. The more they could produce themselves, the less they depended on shifting market prices or outside circumstances. A bad harvest, a price hike, a crisis that were completely out of their control. Today, a lot of people are rediscovering interest in this seemingly forgotten habit, and not only for economic reasons, but because it offers a sense of security and self-sufficiency that's very hard to find anywhere else in modern life. Secret #13. They knew exactly where their money was going. Even though there were no finance apps, no colorful charts, no phone notifications warning about every purchase, many families had a surprisingly precise understanding of their financial situation at all times. They knew almost by heart how much money had come into the house that week, how much had already been spent, and how much was actually left until the next paycheck. That constant, almost automatic awareness let them make better decisions in the moment and avoid serious problems before they exploded. They didn't need to check a screen to know whether they could afford an extra expense that month. They were simply used, out of habit and necessity, to really paying attention to their money. something that today feels almost like a superpower. This might be one of the most forgotten habits on this entire list today. So many people work incredibly hard to earn their money, but spend very little time, almost none, understanding exactly where that money goes every month. Could you say, right now, how much you spent last week without checking your phone? Secret hashed 14. Celebrations were simpler, and still unforgettable birthdays, family gatherings, and special events didn't revolve around spending. They revolved, above all, around people. A celebration might consist of gathering borrowed chairs in the backyard, several women in the family cooking together, and spending the afternoon full of laughter and conversation, without anyone worrying about expensive decorations or extravagant gifts. Celebrations centered on real company, long conversations, shared memories. As a result, families could enjoy deeply meaningful moments without having to compromise their financial stability for a single afternoon of celebration. Over time, many celebrations have turned into quiet competitions, where it seems necessary to spend more and more to prove love, success, or both at once. Yet these families understood something very simple and very true. The best memories are almost never the most expensive ones. Secret hashtag 15. They bought less, but bought better. When they finally decided to spend money on something, they tried to do it as smartly as possible. Instead of always looking for the cheapest option on the market, they often preferred to invest a little more in products that offered greater quality and, above all, greater durability. A cast iron pot bought once could last a lifetime and be passed down to the next generation. A well-made tool got repaired instead of replaced. They understood that a sturdy item could last them for years, while a low-quality one would likely need to be replaced several times over that same period, ultimately costing more money in the end. Even though the upfront investment was somewhat higher, the long-term savings became clear to anyone who actually did the math. This way of thinking reveals a huge difference between two concepts we often confuse: price and value. Price is what you pay today, in the moment. Value is what you get over all the years that follow. And those who truly understood that difference tended to make, almost effortlessly, far better financial decisions than everyone else. At this point, we've covered 15 habits, and a very clear pattern starts to emerge if you've been paying attention. None of these habits depended on earning a fortune. None required advanced financial knowledge or access to extraordinary opportunities that you don't have today. Most of them came down to something much simpler, and for that very reason, much more powerful: discipline, patience, and plain common sense. Maybe that's exactly why they're still so relevant today, almost 80 years later. Because tools change, technology moves forward at an unstoppable pace, circumstances keep evolving, but the fundamental principles of good money management stay practically untouched. And here's my direct question for you. Out of these first 15 habits, which one do you find hardest to apply in your life today? Write it in the comments. I genuinely want to read your answer and see which one comes up the most. And if you're enjoying what you're hearing, this is the perfect moment to subscribe. Never hesitate to support knowledge like this. Secret hash 16. They never wasted food. For many families in the 1950s, throwing food in the trash simply wasn't something they considered an option. Every ingredient held real value because it represented time, physical effort, and hard-earned money. That's why they learned, almost by instinct, to make the most of absolutely everything that came into the kitchen each week. Leftovers from one meal could be transformed, with a little creativity, into a completely different dish the next day. Leftover chicken broth became soup. Slightly wilted vegetables ended up in a stew. Meals were planned carefully so that nothing went to waste before its time. This habit not only cut costs directly, but also fostered a deep mindset of respect for the resources they had available. Today, in the United States alone, millions of dollars worth of perfectly good food end up wasted every year, tossed straight into the trash. Yet these families understood something we've completely forgotten. Saving money often isn't about earning more. It's simply about making better use of what's already in the fridge. Secret hashtag 17. They knew how to tell need from want. One of the greatest secrets to their financial stability was something that sounds obvious, but that almost no one truly practices today. They knew how to clearly distinguish between what they needed and what they simply wanted. Before making any purchase, no matter how small, They'd stop for a moment to consider whether it would bring a real, lasting benefit to the household, or whether it was just a passing impulse that would fade in a couple of days. This way of thinking helped them avoid completely unnecessary expenses and focus their limited resources on things that genuinely improved their quality of life over time. This doesn't mean they never allowed themselves a small indulgence now and then. It means they learned to put those indulgences in the right place within their priorities, without letting them eat up the month's budget. The difference between a need and a want can seem obvious when you hear it stated plainly, but often it's exactly that thin, easy-to-cross line, without you even noticing, that ends up determining whether a person moves forward financially over the years, or stays trapped in the same constant struggles month after month. Secret #18. They shopped with a list and stuck to it. When it was time to do the week's shopping, very little was left to chance. Many families prepared a careful list before leaving the house, usually the night before, and made a point of sticking to it once inside the store, no matter what tempting deal appeared along the way. This simple habit was very effective at preventing impulse purchases, and it helped maintain real control over the family budget. It also forced them to think ahead about what was actually needed at home, instead of making decisions driven by hunger, emotion, or the carefully designed temptations placed along the aisles. Even though it might seem like a minor detail compared to everything else we've covered, small impulse purchases, that chocolate bar, that magazine, that little aisle temptation, tend to pile up completely silently until they turn, without you realizing it, into fairly significant amounts of money by the end of the month. They knew this perfectly well, and acted accordingly every time they walked into a store. Secret #19. They shared resources within the community. Collaboration between neighbors went far beyond simple emotional support in hard times. In many neighborhoods, there was an entire informal culture, written down nowhere, of sharing tools, knowledge, and resources to avoid unnecessary expenses that no single family could afford on its own. If someone needed a specific tool for a one-time home repair, it was completely normal to borrow it from a neighbor instead of buying a new one they'd only use once. The same went for skills and practical knowledge. Whoever knew how to fix engines helped others when needed. Whoever knew how to sew mended clothes for several families in the neighborhood. Whoever had basic electrical knowledge checked wiring for free, knowing that one day they too would receive help when they needed it. This spirit of cooperation cut real costs for everyone involved, and at the same time strengthened a sense of community that, honestly, is quite scarce in most neighborhoods today. It was clear proof that collective prosperity often comes from neighbors working together, not just from each person's individual resources. Secret #20. They always had a plan for hard times. Perhaps because they had already lived through periods of great uncertainty and hardship, many families developed the constant habit of preparing for tough situations, even during times when everything was going relatively well. They knew, from their own experience or from what they'd seen their parents go through, that at any moment, unexpected illness, sudden job loss, or unplanned expenses could show up. That's why they instinctively avoided taking on large financial commitments that could put the household's entire stability at risk if something went wrong. This mindset let them face real hardships with much more peace of mind whenever those hardships eventually, sooner or later, showed up in their lives. They couldn't control the future, no one can, but they could prepare ahead of time to face it in better shape than most people around them. If this is making you reflect on your own financial situation right now, this is exactly the perfect moment to subscribe to the channel. There are still the last 5 secrets to go, and trust me when I say the ending of this video is going to stay with you for a long time. Secret #21. They valued patience over instant gratification. We live in a time where practically everything is designed, on purpose, to be obtained instantly, with just one click. And yet, many families in the 1950s understood something that sounds almost old-fashioned today. The best financial decisions usually need time to mature. Patience let them calmly compare different options, gradually save for major future purchases, and avoid impulsive mistakes that would later be very hard to fix. They didn't feel an urgent need to get everything right away, because they understood, from repeated experience, that waiting often led to much better outcomes than acting rashly. This ability to delay instant gratification remains, to this day, one of the psychological traits most commonly found among people who manage to build real, lasting financial stability over the long term. Studies on financial behavior confirm this again and again. Secret #22. They taught that money was a tool, not a status symbol. In many households of that era, money was seen simply as a resource meant to provide security, real opportunities, and peace of mind for the whole family. It wasn't something that defined a person's worth to others, nor a way to show superiority over a neighbor or a brother-in-law. This perspective, as simple as it was powerful, helped maintain a much healthier, more balanced relationship with family finances overall. The goal was never to appear wealthy in front of the community. It was, simply, to build a stable life for their children and for the generations still to come. When money stops being a practical tool and slowly turns into a silent social competition, it becomes much easier to fall into harmful financial decisions that take years to undo afterward. They seem to understand this truth almost naturally, without needing anyone to explain it to them in a book. Secret #23. They learn to be self-sufficient. So many tasks that today get automatically handed off to someone else, or paid for without a second thought, were handled directly by family members themselves. Learning practical skills, sewing, repairing things, cooking from scratch, doing small home repairs, was part of everyday life from childhood on, and it allowed them to solve countless household problems without spending extra money every time something broke. Beyond the direct measurable savings, this self-sufficiency built something just as valuable: personal confidence and a real sense of control over life's circumstances. The more things they could handle on their own without depending on anyone else, the less they depended on outside factors completely beyond their control. This is a particularly interesting lesson to hear today, because it shows that increasing income isn't always the only way to improve a difficult financial situation. Reducing your dependence on others, step by step, can also make a huge difference over time. Secret #24. They put stability before luxury. So many people, both then and now, chase the appearance of success before they've even built a minimally solid financial foundation beneath their feet. These families tended to do exactly the opposite. Their number one priority was making sure the household's essential needs were covered without fail: food, shelter, basic health. Then, that there was some reasonable cushion for unexpected emergencies. And only after reaching that minimum level of security did they consider other expenses that, at the time, were less important or urgent. Only once that foundation was truly solid did they allow themselves to think about an occasional luxury, almost always a modest one. This clear way of setting priorities helped them avoid countless financial problems that are extremely common today, and gave them a peace of mind that no luxury bought on credit could ever offer you. And we've reached the last one on the list, perhaps the most powerful secret of all the ones we've covered today. Secret #25. They thought about future generations. Many of their daily decisions, small as they seemed at the time, weren't focused only on the immediate present. They thought about their children. They thought about their future grandchildren. They thought about the real opportunities they could create for people who, in many cases, hadn't even been born yet. Every dollar saved through effort, every unnecessary expense deliberately avoided, every responsible habit sustained for years, was part of a much bigger vision than themselves. It wasn't just about surviving the following month, though that mattered too. It was about building, brick by brick, a solid foundation that would directly benefit those who came after them. When a person starts thinking in terms of entire generations, and not just weeks or months, their financial decisions change completely, almost at the root. And maybe that's exactly why these lessons, quietly passed down from parents to children, have managed to survive for so long, all the way to this video today. After hearing all 25 secrets, you've probably already noticed something important on your own. None of them depended on winning the lottery overnight. None required an extraordinary salary out of reach for the average person. And none was based on get-rich-quick magic formulas, the kind that flood social media today. The vast majority came from simple habits, almost boring when you look at them from the outside, repeated over and over for years, without pause and without excuses. That's exactly what makes these lessons so valuable today, almost 80 years after they were first practiced in those kitchens. Because circumstances change, technology keeps evolving at an unstoppable pace, and times keep moving forward without ever stopping. But discipline, patience, and financial responsibility never go out of style. Never. Maybe the real question isn't then exactly how those families managed to stay out of debt during one of the hardest periods in recent history. Maybe the real question, the one that truly matters, is a different one. How many of these 25 habits are you willing to bring back into your own life, starting today? Because at the end of the day, financial freedom is almost never built through spectacular decisions or strokes of luck. It's built, quietly, through small right choices, made with discipline, day after day, for years. Seeing that you've made it this far, honestly, congratulations. You're part of a very small percentage of people who stayed with this to the very end, and that already says a lot about you, and about how much you truly want to improve. Leave the word discipline in the comments, so I know, without a doubt, that you made it this far. And if you truly enjoyed this content, subscribe to the channel right now, because here we keep rescuing, week after week, the financial lessons that helped entire generations thrive, even when every circumstance seemed to be working against them. Share this video right now with that person who always says, almost with resignation, that saving money is impossible for them. Maybe one of these 25 lessons is exactly what that person needs to hear today. See you in the next video.